This is Single Onion number 183. We're really excited about this. We've got poets coming to you from across Canada, which is very exciting for us. And I want to thank Shelf Life Books for continuing to partner with us as we do these online events. We've got 4 poets for you this evening. Our first poet is Sue Sinclair. Her debut collection, Secrets of Weather and Hope, was nominated for the Gerald Lambert Award, while subsequent collections have earned a place on the Globe Top 100 list, won the IPPY Poetry Award and the Pat Lowther Award. Her latest collection is Almost Beauty, New and Selected Poems from Goose Lane. So please welcome Sue Sinclair.
Hey folks, thanks to David and to Shelf Life for having me. I did live in Calgary for a year and definitely spent a fair amount of time at Shelf Life, so I'm happy to return virtually. I'm mostly going to be reading from this book, Almost Beauty. I missed my own launch due to COVID, so this will actually be the first time I read from it. But first I thought that I would read one of Stephen Heighton's poems, since Stephen passed away a couple of days ago. I've got The Waking Comes Late here, which is a book that I actually bought for my husband for Valentine's Day and got Stephen to sign in 2018. So I'm going to start with a lovely little sonnet here called The Turn. Everyone kept referring to the turn in the poem, and it troubled the poet. She didn't understand. Perhaps, she thought, in all her life's work, there was no such turn, nor in her life itself, which must then mean her journey was simply a homestretch. No epic detours, colorful car wrecks, no fork in the road crisis where one lane veered toward a fuller life off map. Well, tough. Maybe her heart was always unmanic, shy, but shaker steady. Maybe her poems, like her mind, served more subtle metronomes. So what? In her life, no stirring cinematic turns, yet still her words make song enough. Oh, sending that out to Stephen. So Almost Beauty is new and selected. So I figured I would start with new and work my way through some of the selecteds. The first one is called the Prado, which is a big art museum in Madrid, which is where my husband's parents used to live. So I spent a little bit of time at the Prado. It's a prose poem, so it's written in sort of very short blocks of prose, one after the other down the page. And it's the first one in the book because it kind of functions like an ars poetica. Is talking a little bit about what poetry is for me, I suppose. Prado. Afterward, I asked myself what I'd looked for. Some faces, I thought. Faces of saints, faces of lions, faces of prophets, faces of mothers. One face looking into another, perhaps. The faces that look out from the frame, the way I feel myself, looking out from wherever consciousness lies. The face of the servant holding the blood-stained nails removed from the cross. How he looks down, puzzled, from the ladder on which he's propped. That's how I want to write. And then I want to look the way I've tried to write. You can practice this at museums. I try meeting the eyes of those willing to meet mine. Try to feel what it is to be willing. Poems too are practice. I am looking at you now. Are you looking at me? I want a world that is trustworthy. I want to lay the best version of my faults at your feet as you do the same for me. I imagine Hieronymus Bosch watching us writhe and tear and eke our way toward the available pleasures. A ripe strawberry, a bird, a hand, a face. If there's in me something worth being seen, let it look out at you from my face. Let me try. Let me try again. And again and again and again, as the writing of poetry goes. Okay, so now I'm going back to my first book, and I'm going to read the poem called Red Pepper, which is actually after a photograph by Edward Weston. Just trivia. Red Pepper. Forming in globular convolutions, as though growth were a disease, a patient evolution toward even greater deformity. It emerges from under the leaves, thick and warped as melted plastic, its whole body apologetic. The sun is hot. Put your hand on it, the size of your heart, which may look like this, abashed perhaps, growing in ways you never predicted. It is almost painful to touch, but you can't help yourself. It's so familiar. The dents, the twisted symmetry. You can see how hard it has tried. So then I'm moving into, where am I next? So I'm moving into my third book here. This is a poem I wrote for my parents, who neither of them drink, and yet they somehow met in a bar. So this is called Before You Were Born. They have taken a step away from the familiar. Their lives so far peel like paint. Behind it, their real existence. Your father at the bar buys your mother a drink. You are hidden, painted into the picture, but camouflaged. No one has seen you yet. They watch the bartender hold the tap. It shines like the places they hope to visit, the plans they don't have yet. She is a room in a house that lets the light in slowly. His inner life rests on his face like a lamp he's forgotten to turn off. The visible makes love to the invisible. People gather around tables, quivering, wanting to be taken from darkness into the flame. So that's for mom and dad. We're in Newfoundland time and asleep. Okay, so I'm carrying on through the book to my last book, which was Heaven's Thieves. I'm going to read the poem called Cherry Trees because, you know, we're not quite there yet here in New Brunswick, but I'm hoping we'll get there soon. Cherry trees. A blur of white, pre-photogenic. Ships bound for distant shores. A hint of nostalgia that isn't an escape. Or if it is, I escape only into the here and now. Only into this same place, cast in another light. The trees stand unblinking, pull down so much sun they seem finally to disappear in it, become a deficiency, pale, forgetful. They gather absence around them, and are strangely increased by it in a way I envy. It feels like someone has laid their head on my shoulder, and it weighs nothing at all. I've got one more for you. Flipping back to the new poems again. Here we are. And springtime again, because, you know, why be a poet if you can't write about springtime and flowers? So this one's Daffodils. It's not called Daffodils, but it's about daffodils. And it's really about sort of a reckoning that I had of being a bit of a snot about daffodils and trying to get over it. It borrows language from Lisa Fishman, American poet, 2 lines from her book, The Happiness Experiment. One is, "Oh, bright assembled matter," that's hers. And "how very many names you have when you are loved," that's hers as well when I get to them. Oh, daffodils, oh, bright assembled matter, cruelly fringed, yellow and odorless, forgive me. How have I taken you to be less real than you are? Mere cultivars deprived of subjectivity. Even now, as you flash upon my inward eye, I most recall the lack on which your excess seems to draw. Not even the ghost of a scent straying among you, tickling your stiff collars. I have pitied you, the evolutionary advantage of your good looks. Endless, scentless replicas propagated ad nauseum. I have looked at you as if you were no more than a poorly executed plan on which no outcome now depends. How very many names you have when you are loved. I'm sorry not to have named you till now, to have been so sparing with my love. I didn't think I was the kind to scapegoat. Why was this so hard for me to see? Oh, daffodils, please, be the warrant for my second effort. I'm rallying. I'm running a finger along your green spines. I'll do better. I'm tying a knot in this afternoon sunlight as a reminder. From now on, my eyes, my blood, my nerves will leap at your bidding. And I have indeed planted a bunch of daffodils in my yard. Thanks for listening. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the crew here.
Thanks so much, Sue. And we're happy that we're the first place where you get to share your work for your new collection you selected. And thank you for sharing the poem by Stephen Heighton. That's a really special thing for us as well. So we appreciate that. Our next reader is Nduka Otiono. He is a writer, associate professor, and graduate program coordinator at the Institute of African Studies at Carleton University. He is the author and co-editor of 9 books of creative writing and academic research. Prior to turning to academia, he was a journalist for 15 years in Nigeria and served as the general secretary of the Association of Nigerian Authors. His creative writing honors include the ANA Spectrum Prize for Fiction and honorary mention for the ANA Cadbury Poetry Prize. The collection Displaced, the Poetry of Enduca Otiono is his latest book, and it's published by Wilfrid Laurier University Press. So please welcome Nduka.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, David. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm located at the unceded and unsurrendered land of the Algonquin Queens, in Ottawa, Canada here. And I want to thank you, David. And then I also like to thank Shelf Life Books for organizing this and inviting me. I'm very delighted to meet. This is a very exciting pursuit. Some of those lines really, really touched me, and I look forward to hearing the others also read. So tonight, I'm going to read one of my older poems. I'm reading from my new book, and it's also new and selected poems. It's called This Place. This Place. And this is a poem that I wrote during the military dictatorship in Nigeria before I moved to Canada. So tonight, I'm just in that mood of one switch to the back and then shuttling to the present. This poem, I wrote this poem, and when I finished writing, it's a sequence, a long sequence, that opens one of my books. It's in phases. So I'm going to read phase 2. And this is a moment, I had left the university and there was just so much crisis. And I was fascinated by the idea of the poet as neurotic, so, you're just raving as mind things just go on. So if you find this a bit more raving, and ideally there's some parts of it that I would have needed you to sing along with me, but I'm going to do those parts today myself. Knowing that sometimes when you try this with Zoom, you're going to hear some responses almost 2 seconds or 3 seconds after one person had, and it just sounds, totally chaotic. So I'm going to do both. So this is from the sequence phase 2, Rhapsody of a Lunatic. And it's dedicated to Ken Saro-Wiwa. Ken Saro-Wiwa was an environmental rights activist who was executed by hanging by the military dictator Sani Abacha in Nigeria. And he was a member of the Writers Guild, and he was a friend of mine. So I wrote this poem with him in mind, and then just dealing with those issues. Rising Sun. Who can stop these bullets of decadence flying in my country? Who can heal these wounds inflicted on my homeland? I wake up every morning thinking of sorrows, tears, and blood. I wake up sweeping my lens across the terrain, chained by tin gods and mammon, bullets, and ballots. I wake up each day, crying until a scarlet sun sets in my eyes, mocking this plague that rules the nation. Who can heal this bleeding ulcer inflicted on my country's resources? Who can deconstruct this art of madness? Sons of a soil sodden with oil but keen for fuel at dry filling stations. I plod through the epicenter of this disfigured landscape, frightening children with my ragged clothes, snapping shots of the characters I meet. I see pain photostated on the faces of starving citizens. I smell grief wafting out of the sweaty underarms of laborers. And who can perfume this suffocating air that reeks of sorrows, tears, and blood? Stand by my side and look in the mirror with me. What do you see? Raisins in the sun, or a somber procession of mourning widows whose husbands were washed with acid, aging children with a skin-thin spread of flesh, truculent area boys and unemployed youths, aggressive beggars praying for traffic jams so they could hustle for alms, opulent politicians, khaki boys and dupers smelling inside automobiles of stolen comfort and vulgar wealth, harlots dressed and smelling like models in glamour magazines, writers and musicians searching for patrons, weary with worry over their next act. Compatriot, look at the corner of my mirror. Do you see honest people tempted to join them because they cannot beat them? Do you know this is a hallowed slogan in our homeland? Can you hear the humdrum of confusion at the bus stops? This is Lagos, brother man, my morose mosaic, my splintered image of sadness. Can you see these mottled images in the mirror? If I disobey this surging urge to fear our shame, will the muse forgive me? If I disobey this surging urge, if my pen drips with bleeding lines, would you blame me, soul brother? I've seen sick men wail in the streets of this city for want of chicken change to save their children. I've seen mothers lost in men's ties so their children will survive. And this is Lagos, center of excellence, wherein I've learned the tricks of survival like a guerrilla fighter. In the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty, sings Bob the Legend. Who can disrupt this act of madmen, sons of a soil surfeit with oil but keen for fuel at drought-ridden stations? If I shun this shame, my country, Wouldn't our ancestors, citizens of bygone happier days, wouldn't they denounce this song of the season? Wouldn't they call it a madman's tantrums? And you say, a country deserves the leader she gets. Do you feel the grief grilling in my heart? Can you hear me, avatars of law? Today, I sing of betrayed dreams, of rape resources. I sing of the hell that's here, the sanctions that encroach, the angst, the dying flesh. I sing of life and its profane abuse of all that's sacred. I smart from insults on God by hypocritical zealots who eye heaven and abandon the commonwealth to rogues. If I disobey this compelling command, this huge passion surging in my veins, nudging my heart to act, will you forgive me, Lord? If I kill the exploiters, Lord, will you mind? Use this transition, oh Lord. Send down a Messiah, not false prophets, not greedy baboons. Remove the savage desires lodged in the heart of the rock. Let us sing of change, of revolutions that feed on human flesh. Let distribution undo excess. And when the Passover is over, let me sing of hope to heal the scars of our rape and redeem the vestiges of our decadence. But before the Passover is over, let me embalm this shame, exorcise this mad umbrage into which I have been driven. And then I'll take the second in this sequence. The second is titled Galloping in the Gallows. And there's an image of Kansarowa in the gallows, before it was snapped, and it's a very sad poem. You should sing with Pablo, my country people. He sees you fermenting under the skin of my love. He sees you sulking like dust before the rain, and you say you don't love me, galloping away in the gallows, cherishing my presences, hugging me in your dreams like the fence encircling a palm tree in the botanical gardens. Sing with Neruda saying, folks, for every moment you see me, every moment you think of me, your heart sings, your mind fractures into tiny pearls of envy for my freedom. I, madman citizen of the rainbow, son of man, you lie. When you say you don't care, you lie. Your wishes betray you, smelling like damp forests. Your wishes fly in the wind like confetti over a reluctant groom. Your wishes itch for fulfillment, like a bride anticipating wedding gifts. Your wishes gallop in the shadows, prostrating before my maddening beauty. Son of man, you care like Adam in Eden. Surrender now, says I. Oh, macho man, surrender now, says your ego. Don't let your heart rule your head. I've seen Samsons, I've seen Solomons in a common error. Ask the Bible. Sing now, macho man. Come on, sing from the captain's verses. Sing of the wind and its crown galloping in the shadowy foam. Sing on, new man. Your voice booms like the town crier's gong. Your voice baritones my heart like Pablo's love songs, diagnosing this disease called love. And you sulk with dust like lust before the rain, like the beast in you. And then I just take this other one, and I think that will be about my time. I have about 15 minutes, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'll complete this sequence. The other one is Soul of My Madness. So this is a point where the madman who is in raving hits the peak, and then the raving just goes on. So this section 4 is called Soul of My Madness. Burn, rubber burn, flames infernos burn, gas flares scorching earth burn. My heart bleeds like mayflowers of pride of Barbados. My word tease our inertia. As you say, apathy is your name, no longer Nana the toxic man. You charm me like beggars hollering across tinted glasses of limousines at crossroads. You amuse me, saying I speak in learned tongues, alluding to Pablo the poet, bearing our tattered lives before the world. But your pockets smell like the local corpse's pockets. Your palms itch in anticipation of another bribe. Grover, your name now is a Gunja. Your face, like the dictator's face, is corrugated with rust. And I, poet of the hanged generation, now chant you Tamsi the Congo man. Chant of the tick of your soul, chant of dancing when you're sad. Burn, rubber burn, flames, infernos, bonfires, burn, gas flares, scorching earth, burn. Bear burn their shame, Shell-shocked, my heart bleeds like mayflowers of pride of Barbados. I'm your blessed madman, talking sanity into your heads. I am brave, I rave, I read, I search for bread. I am ostensibly mad. Sorrow in my heart, tears in my eyes, blood on my lips, noses in my dreams. I drink, I think, I mock, I talk about singing fella. Hungry, they waka for in face. Yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. Kala cuckoo, kala cuckoo. Yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. Cuckoo, 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 cuckoo. Yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. When I remember how Ken's life was abridged, when I remember him galloping in the gallows, when I remember fragments of all I've seen, heard, and read, I rap, I tap, I rave, I crave revenge. I am your mad rhapsodist, ostensibly so. You amuse me, pondering what monologue, pondering what manner of madness this is. I'm your wandering mad raconteur. I drink, I read, I brood, I parody, I drift, I craft my lines. When I remember fragments of all I've seen, heard, and read, I wash our dirty linen in the streets. I rap, I tap, I dance, I prance about. I laugh, I cry, I write my street poems, soul of my madness, monologue of my insanity. And ask not if this be poetry. Soldier boys kill the poet in me, now are born illusions and rhapsodies. Born rubber born, yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. Flames, flares, bonfires, yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. Bear born, their shame, yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. Look at the man, ide waka, yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. Chant it himself, yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, yeah. Kala cuckoo, kala cuckoo, yeah, yeah, rolling, yeah, 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 rolling, yeah, 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 rolling, yeah, yeah. I'm ostensibly mad. Sorrow in my heart, tears in my eyes, blood on my lips. I stomp, I romp, I read, I need my pains. I, rhapsodies of an endangered generation, sing of mapless journeys, sing of landmines planted by goggle generals, sing of fresh noses on our darkling plain. But let the tidal waves rise, roaring with Ken's legendary laughter. Let them rise, foaming with the general's asses. That's that sequence, just an excerpt from the sequence. And I'll just do one poem, and that will be it. I think I probably am able to do one poem. And I want to move away from one that is, that's probably less, one that is less elegiac. So I'm going to do this poem where I visited San Francisco, and I went to where the Pacific meets, you know, and I've been around Berkeley and all of that, and finally went sightseeing, you know, and then I wrote this poem. The title is Meeting the Pacific at Point Reyes. Some of you may not know Point Reyes in California. It's for Lee Swenson, tour guide and marvelous host. Sitting at the Pacific at Point Reyes, the mind rummages its 2.5 miles depth as the sea spreads its wide mysteries through 1/3 of the Earth's surface. In the horizon, earth and water in combat invoke the fate of Ferdinand Magellan. On that day when, filled with seasickness, the famed explorer blotted Mare Pacificum. At Point Reyes, I see the sea is truly peaceful. Today, the water ripples as it's caressed by lazy wind, and the grasses kissing the borders of the beach sway and hiss respectfully to nature's songs. Mariana, the Ukrainian, picks California blackberries as Lee locates Point Reyes lighthouse in the fog, a 37-foot testimony to human challenge of nature. Queen, the thinking of Vietnam, writes his daughter's name on the beach sands. And I, troubadour of many colors, think of Lagos Bar Beach, where every holiday Olokun takes a swimmer for sacrifice, and the Atlantic, ever hungry, eats our land. But at Point Reyes, there are no signs of a shrinking ocean, no sounds of any plate tectonics below, only nature in her marine splendor. I will return to your watery presence. I will return to your watery majesty, Pacific, a wanderer in search of oceanic secrets, And like Pablo Neruda, I yearn only to become the incarnation of marine storm. And I think I'll just leave it with this note that I have deliberately read this poem because as I read this poem, I think of my friend Mariana, the Ukrainian whom I met on that trip, and I can't but continue to share in the grief. One of the most dastardly experiences of our generation, of our century. How, we in real time watch the spectacle of the destruction of another country. It's like spectacle, and nobody does anything about it. Every day. So I think of Mariana, she keeps posting, she's drawing massively. Her inspiration is at its peak because like she is sublimating the grief every day in her drawing and in her poetry, and she just becomes far more eloquent, and it's just unimaginable that the world could watch every day like a bad film, one country destroying another country in real time, and it's playing over the television. Let me not spoil your evening. I think it's an evening of poetry, and but at the same time, one for reflections. And I end my reading tonight thinking of Mariana and Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Enduca. That was really wonderful. It was great to hear those poems. And this was your second reading of the evening, so you've been busy sharing your work.
Thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. Our next poet is Kevin Andrew Heslop. He's a polydisciplinary artist whose debut poetry collection, The Correct Fury of Your Why is a Mountain, was published by Gordon Hill Press in 2021, and whose work as a poet, filmmaker, curator, playwright, and journalist has appeared or is forthcoming in the Fiddlehead, Anstruther Press, and Frog Hollow Press, as well as the Toronto Short Film Festival, the Los Angeles International Film Festival, the Milan Gold Awards, and the Paris Play International Film Festival, as well as the Thames Review, for which Kevin currently serves as poetry editor and resident interviewer. So please welcome Kevin Andrew Heslop.
Thank you very much, David, for hosting and convening us this evening. Thank you to Jun and Shelf Life Books, Sue and Duka, Gemma. It's a privilege and a pleasure to read with you. And I thought I might begin by echoing Sue's gesture of offering a poem from Stephen, his turn, with a poem called The Frail Light of Birches, which is from the debut collection that David mentioned, and which I think of as a kind of sprig of laurel offered to the grave of another late great poet, Czesław Miłosz, and which reads, like a just spent flashbulb in its concave theater tiring, Czesław's mind incandesces, comforting the things of this tortured earth. In composing verses, he abided by two virtues, diligence and resignation. I dreamt I asked, what is the etymology of literature? And saw a sludge of mischief in his eye, replying, well, the word is of three parts, lit, terra, tur. Miłosz was claimed by a Catholic crypt, bene quaescas, and the page, equally supine, remains dreaming, perhaps in chalk, of thistles, of dragonflies. Brief poem called Poetry. Poetry is philosophy in evening wear. This is called Web. The tweet shall inherit the verse. And because it's my proudest publication, the Fiddlehead of Fall 2020, and because Sue's in the audience this evening, I thought I'd read I Cavalloni, which appeared, as I mentioned, a couple of years ago, a couple falls ago. I Cavalloni. The Italian word for high waves doubles as the word for horses. Something in the coastal imagination must have blent the curve of mains with the force of the wind, I suppose. So, floating south from Salerno to Viro Valentina, in the sleeper I see skeins of white-faced ponies, ceremonial in bells, gallop across the silent blue-green Tyrrhenian sea, children ample in music, dreaming on the beaches, no final revelation. When my son was a boy, his theater teacher, a woman who'd spent 16 months tending stables in her 20s, told his mother and me, actors are like teenagers, are like horses, capable of bucking the very sky, but with the nervous system of a hummingbird. She must have sensed we didn't know what to make of him. The turbulence of his Septembers. I think of him, how in the bakery in Naples last week, a woman, her hand clutching a crucifix of brackish olive wood on a thin chain, told me that God could call him back, no trace of discomfort in her mild, neighbor-loving eyes. And is the man singing in the next car conscious of the crack of lightning over the bay on dim summer nights when nothing sings except the residue of misspent afternoons, and God could call him back? Call it pain is bread. Call it the universe is a rain-streaked bakery. Call it when he was in hospital, it wasn't me who asked for the semi-private room. His neighbor sang every night to shepherd his dreaming. He was a studio musician trained in decades of French horn. A young man still, they were unable to prevent the subdivision of his cancer cells. 64th notes had been his nemesis professionally, he joked. It was the way my son would comfort us at 4 a.m. He would comfort us on a Tuesday, up night sick, lift an intumated hand, smiling around a nasal cannula with a thumbs up. The way any patient recited their diagnosis, Latin, a Colosseum falling. I see why Dostoevsky flung Raskolnikov at the flaying that broke Nietzsche as waves of white horses buck in their breaking on the shore towards God could speak, she said, clutching his only son, begotten in olive wood, the word doubled, crucifix or caduceus, blue-green turning into waves. Here's a poem that was written in response to the crisis that preceded the pandemic, which I guess in this country anyways was actually it's a crisis which belies a larger crisis, the shutting down of the railroads as a result of protests. And the poem's called Human Beings Have Met to Suture the Wounds the Railroads Have Made Across This Country. Let's say it's one of those windfall nights in July, when four friends sit mostly sitting, not speaking around a campfire, illuminating their faces in a pattern whose unpredictability at that hour and depth of saturation, if the data could be harvested and charted, which cluster points, that was the term that came to mind, trends, would certainly reveal something about the implicit mathematics of the universe, like the stars alternately concealed and disembarked from by clouds moving coldly like the tattered thoughts of the world not helping anyone just above their heads. The hour is the one with the curve in its back, booze in its belly, blood in its cheeks. And one of the friends said almost involuntarily, in part revelation and part considered admission, that she wishes she had married someone who could play the piano. She is a lab technician, let's say, which means that earlier tonight she relieved her scalp of the gentle ache the bun of her hair makes, and the campfire light in her loosed hair plays like young cats in the sand, as the four friends mutually witness this unmolested true sentence she has just spoken, hanging before them as the fire bites and crackles away at it, and one of them says, "Mm-hmm." And the four produce the laughs they are inclined or accustomed to do on such a windfall night in July. It's late. And human beings have met to suture the wounds the railroads have made across this country, bled for centuries of ore and oil and timber and flesh and precious metals in a manner reported by the poor, swollen news networks, miasmic with commercials selling the exhausting obligations of happiness, as a national railroad shutdown. That was the phrase. Shut down St. John's, Newfoundland, running low on propane in one of the coldest winters in its history. declares the italicized preface to an article commissioned by a media conglomerate funded in large part by the very oil corporation to which our prominent economists apply the verb hemorrhaging, as in the phrase hemorrhaging capital unironically. And what would John the Apostle say of the matter except that propane had no business in his namesake to begin with? And what was propane but St. John fathoming propane? Would you say we may have wandered from our subject? No one of the friends wants to say a word, shift their seat, for fear that it might precipitate thoughts of the morning and the children whose bellies they are responsible for settling with orange juice and eggs and toast, into whose peanut buttered surface a knife is drawn in the shape of a heart like the stencils we have made on cave walls and gravestones for hundreds of thousands of years, a species preparing our little ones for the day, stretching uncomprehending before them in the sun which shone, as Beckett would have it, upon the nothing new. What could children know of the provinces and jurisdictions we have devised, crisscrossed with bulk freight they'd identify parked before a train crossing as choo-choos? How in good conscience to slip the paperback, perfect-bound workbook with the harmonious drawings of the ecosystem into the glittering pink and blue Dora the Explorer backpack after the 6-year-old has carefully nibbled around the edge of the heart, drawn in the peanut butter so that the toast is the shape of a heart, her baby teeth having near perfectly defined its edge. And what to do but lift this child and kiss her inconsolably? And when the bus pulls from the waving place on the corner, what to do but return to the nook to pick up with 2 fingers the plastic cup she emptied of concentrated orange juice, and the plate stippled with crumbled flecks of peanut butter, and bring them to the sink and convince yourself into its professional bun, and stand with your throat in your hands, wondering what in the world is coming next. Etymology. Mellifluous is from the late Latin for runny honey. Mellifluous is from the late Latin for honey, running. When you left, you took almost everything. And finally, the virus is the thought we are individuals. The thought we are individuals is the virus, is the thought we are individuals. The thought we are individuals is the virus, is make the impermeable barrier of the self great again, wealth forgetting all but self. I have to tell you, yes, the thought we are individuals is the virus. I was walking by. The very geese seem to have, I'm sure it's not serious, but forgotten how to migrate, standing like steer in the overhyped grass amidst the sort of snow build-up. The river, its referred countenance horizontal gravity ducks seem to prefer sidelong pinnacle gymnastics of light on water, turning like recall. I was wondering about the manifested of it. Meanwhile, this radical, white, individual inclined smallpox folk the Western world must have longed for escaped to City Hall, the Hill, a pimple and taut white apex, a static quo installed as all get out, refusing to example I holiday want this photo to be absolutely massive and voluntarily overwhelming towards the United States of your contemplative grandmother sitting by the window, the stopgap electricity rundown illustrious president bullshit rot. It's we or none of us. Where has what the geese have forgotten gone? Let's consider broadening palette verbally a little bit, seeing a little bit past the us, them, her, him, cis, trans, here, there, binary bullshit. People, the river is washing ton on ton on ton on ton on ton on ton of polypropylene involuntarily, listen carefully, claim to be individual. Then breathe. You are linked to, together with, forever is in your lungs. When you think us, them, when you think us, them, what is in your lungs? Thank you all for your attention, and thank you again to my fellow readers and to David and Jun for making this possible.
Thanks so much, Kevin. That was really wonderful. And again, this was also your second event of the evening, so you've been busy this evening as well. We appreciate it. Before we get to our last poet for this evening, just a couple of quick housekeeping things. I want to say thank you to the Canada Council for the Arts, the League of Canadian Poets, the Calgary Arts Development, and the Writers Guild of Alberta for supporting the Single Onion. And also big thank you to Shelf Life Books for being our partner for a number of years. If you want to learn more about the Single Onion, you can find us at singleonion.com. We've got an email list you can sign up for. We're on Facebook, and you can find us on Twitter as well. Our next event will be May 19th, and that's also, I believe, going to be an online event. And I want to give a big shout out to Kirk Miles and Laurie Roadhouse and the Single Onion crew for all the hard work they do behind the scenes. And we really appreciate it. Our final poet this evening is Gemma Garcia. She published The Thin Red Line in digital and print editions in 2014. More recently, she presented a Spanish poetry collection, Sol de Nagano, self-published as a chapbook in 2021. And upcoming this year, the poem Roots will appear in Barrio Panther Volume 4. Born in Madrid, Spain, Gemma graduated in Spanish language and literature from Universidad Complutense in Madrid and earned an MA and doctorate at the University of Calgary, specializing in modern and contemporary American poetry. So please welcome Gemma Garcia.
Thank you, David. And yeah, it is great to be part of this poetry reading hosted by Single Onion and in Shelf Life in Calgary, and represent Calgary this evening with poets from Ontario and New Brunswick. So it was great to listen to the poetics and beautiful aesthetics of Sue, Enduca, and Andrew Heslop. So I for me, like because I presented Sol de Nagano just last year, and it was a Spanish chapbook that I self-published. And so I'm going to be reading from English translations from poems from Sol de Nagano, which is thematically around Japan and South Korea. And it is emotionally linked, like I wrote it during pandemic and COVID years. So, and the second part is about my last book that I wrote in English, and it's called Iconic Memory. So I'm just gonna share my screen so so you can follow like the first line of the verses, and the poems are short, so it's much easier to see the division between poems. So okay, so yeah, my first poem is from Iconic Memory. Actually, I color coded, but and it's called In the Path. It's a prose poem, and I wanna read this poem. I didn't read it. I wrote this book, Iconic Memory, last summer, and so I didn't have Ukraine in mind. But this poem I dedicate to, or that I wanna kind of like read in support and standing with Ukrainians for the time being, where they are, being taken away so much from their everyday life, from their lives, and from their territories, and from their right to have a country and democracy. So yeah, it has no title, but it starts in the path. In the path to leading a shallow rim, death of Ming dynasty, buried under a bamboo forest, breathing low over the leaves, a breeze frozen narrow window into death of the memorable, into battlefield of the millenary army lies, members of the bodyguard in numbers, duplicated in clay, for the innumerable encounter with legacy of the self-numb. So the next poems are from Sol de Nagano, and Sol de Nagano, it was divided, it's kind of like a short chapbook, and I divided into two sections that are called Sign and Confluence. So the confluence for me during pandemic times was having a ray of hope. And so as Andrew was reading about like the loss of, like feeling feeling individual and feeling that we're only individuals is part of maybe the modern sickness or postmodern sickness or millennial sickness. So yeah, for me, having a ray of hope, it was part of the confluence that rose to existence and a space or virtual space of poetry into feeling everyday life. So, and the other set of poems are the sign, which actually is the signs of Korean alphabet, which is Hangul Signan, because it was historically known to bring democratic knowledge to the Korean people from 13th century onwards. So it's kind of it kind of links with my last book, that is Iconic Memory, because alphabet was learning knowledge and bringing everyday life, bringing more knowledge through alphabet, which is an icon. So, and in my recent book, I reflect on the same, what are the symbols and the signs of icons of our modern, of our recent, more millennial being in existence. So, okay, first, so these are translations. Highway, downtown Tokyo. Silent stream, luminic split in the highway core to Tokyo. In particles, light rays stream the night, radiating in low spectrum a river of light. Host of frequencies, silence, crossing the night with a set destiny, bridge according to legacy. Arranged under past convention, in extents, rooted in your presence. To give away to sound, underlying questions that return to summer, heat buried for millennia. Okay, so the next poem is When Residues. When residues, sediment, infusion, a dream-like current flows, like light rays, transparent, superposing a layered reflection. The time of recollection doesn't escalate, it breathes in maps and skin, a cartography of desire, orbiting a heaven behind, grapevine climbers gave up, abandoned. Design back to nostalgia, a look into autumn, tides over courage. Geography traces for a leaflet, for a loose grievance. When the poet wrote. When the poet wrote about a place, a spot to safeguard, a note, passion was ink with a stylus, with an archaic syntax. It was unbalanced by a shimmering in the verse, a space to a fifth dimension. In descending path, narrowing horizon, in shoreline gorges, where the grass top reach a point infinite. Typography of the lonely, as if wheatgrass was fully occupying the center, field of vision, attention neural point in the horizon. And it is a note in the night. This poem is in my website and it's a short poem in translation. So it is a note in the night that extends across limits over an ignited sky. There aren't any secrets from beats arising in soft valleys, walking during hours of long journey, alone, a non-rising day, a never setting horizon. Okay, so from Iconic Memory, it is poetic collection with prose poems and stanzas as well. And what I collides mainly is a reflection about recent events in Canadian history, from legacy coming from residential schools experiences in British Columbia. And so it has an ethical ground or standpoint that is seeking to bring acknowledgement as well as closure. So yeah, my ethical reflection, it doesn't translate in the poems, but it is based on Viet Nguyen. He is an American Vietnamese novelist, winner of the Pulitzer Award for his novels, The Committed and The Sympathizer, and he laid out his ethics of aesthetics for his novels, but in art in general. So, and he divides like what are the highs and the lows of creating a space that is gone in the past. So iconic memory talks in part about that impossibility of reconcile past with present, and it is an ethical ground that is destined to failure somehow. So, but still, I mean, we as human beings, we need to remember. So from iconic memory and within a few poems, the first one is a prose poem, Preface to Enlightening. Preface to Enlightening, epiphany when flames pushed by the wind on the patio, in theaters and behind the scenes, for a flipping design sealed by courtly admirals on their trade path to progress. For when a turn became overcharged by its purpose, an expansive force of moral bluff, it created a counterpart, disseminated a graded definition. What is that didn't succumb to the fragile touch of ashes? The thread will be gifted in an exchange of courtesy. Upper Lake. Upper Lake in the foreground of a travel vitacora, when possibilities are closing ever since, polar dark remnants oppose in the open. What is not dark in history but the space bound to an extreme edge on the other side, its own reminder, blank realization, a forcing step in the opposite shore, when life was brought to a standstill, a net of filtering light needed by air, unspoken immanence. Iconic memory. Remind me of when I don't forget, upon closing a window for you to bring up my name associated to a set of car keys, objects over the counter, an apartment number, a scheme for tattooing the flashes of memory, traces that I inscribe over an elicited identity. It is a sign of the times, period of reminiscent, iridescent light under a decaying bridge. You are chasing the flash of memory, images printed on stone, trespassing linkages, bonding with the unknown, born to the now. Imagining you retrieving the letter, driving under the bridge, where glass was visibly forgotten from the icon, the rock, a totem pole. Over a horizon of nascent memories, print images that were rewriting over the stone of rebirth in time history. At the exact crossroads, I went by a level railway signal to wait a rendition on parting ways. By the Buffalo Head crossing, a smoke signal, a put down fire, when ashes spread the hour of certainty, doubt in the hour, down an edge, a state within honor. Okay, and this is the last poem, and it's entitled Roots. Roots. Anchorage on the board, abandoned bench to port in hidden harbor, where the underground sign the roots and whispers a cold breath to last fire when Odin raptured. Return to the other side on blent greenery, sand pouring down the passage of time. Raise it when rivalry merged the self and the one. Alterity is not an arrival on the heads opening as with the lake, sure unattended, went to a colored patch, painted on history's canvas. It is diagonally seen at a distance from offshore, safe distance, precipices, inside, sheathing in becoming, deep zero down to next rate. Ancestral races is an expression that grew to be understated. In the midst of a street night photography, a street when the exchanged houses traded currency at quantum threshold analogy of the other side, riverbank of the dispossessed. Boulevard street around crown treetops, walk into the half, steps to newly paved streets, laid on the fort iron, rusted words carved on warrior skin, hailing events, X-ray underground, roots underneath the cloud, upside down, the moon uncovered face to oceans of calm. It is all in the perception of rage, magnetized to knuckles of despair, meter of the hour, a streamline, turn into the unwavering.
Thanks so much, Gemma. That was wonderful. And I want to thank all of our readers this evening. We've got Sue, Enduca, Kevin, and Gemma. That was really wonderful. And thanks to Shelf Life Books for being our co-host for this evening. I'd sent a message to June just to double check, but I think quite a few of the books are actually available in the store. So please do head down there and check out their website. And they're still doing some curbside pickup if you'd like to do that, or delivery. And as I mentioned before, our next event will be on May 19th. So we hope you can join us for that. And thanks to everyone for coming this evening. That was really wonderful.